fans, welcome back to Room 237, and we are finally in the month of October. As I've said in a recent video, for the month of October, I'm going to do horror anthologies. I have a collection video up of all the anthology films I'll get to, and this is the first one of that marathon. So I've already reviewed Creepshow. That was actually, I think, my first horror movie review I ever did on this. Some anthologies I've already done, like the first Tales from the Crypt from the 70s, a few Vincent Price films. But Creepshow was the first actual horror review that I did for Room 237. So I figured it was fitting to open this marathon with its sequel, Creepshow 2 from 1987. Now, I'm just going to lead into this by saying how much of a fan I am of the original film. Of course, I got the shirt, Creepshow. Got, of course, the original film, which this very DVD, this was the first DVD I ever had. I actually grew up with VHS tapes. And then for Christmas, when I was 11, 2002, this was the one DVD I got, and I've had it ever since. This is the only version of Creepshow I'll ever need. Very sentimental to me. I've also always credited Creepshow with being the first real horror film that I saw that got me into horror. I remember seeing it at my grandmother's house. So got the original film, got the shirt. Shortly after, my grandmother got me the comic adaptation. Yeah, it's a little dirty and beat up. Because when I got this, it was actually out of print. She got this off eBay. And I got this around the same time, 2002 or 3. And I still have it. This was actually the first comic I ever read. So 2002 or 3, I read this, and then 2011, I read Killing Joke. That was what started my love for comics. But the comic, then also, Just Desserts, the making of Creepshow, which for a while, this full-length documentary was only available on the German release of Creepshow. And then finally, however it happened, we were able to get a hold of it and it got a Blu-ray. Excellent documentary. One of my top favorite documentaries that I have. Very awesome. I don't have the first season of the show, but I've seen a couple segments and I really want to get the show. But my girlfriend did get me the Pop Funko of the Creep from the show. And yeah, this astronomical turd, which I'll get to. Now, all that being said, similar to Chainsaw Massacre 2, the first time I saw this, I was very underwhelmed. I actually didn't really enjoy it that much. The stories, the acting, some of the effects, definitely the tone, the animation for sure. I wasn't the biggest fan of. Of course, it's not directed by George Romero like the original film. It's directed by Michael Gornick, who was the director of photography on the original film. The stories are still short stories by Stephen King. And that's really the only connective tissue, I guess. I mean, the book-ended story still is the boy Billy from the first film, not played by Joe King, like in this one. And the creep in this one looks more like the Tales from the Crypt comic version. And it is more lighthearted, more humorous to an extent. And I'd only seen it the once, and this was probably 2012, I think, when I actually saw it. I remember seeing it at the video store when I was a kid. But going back to it a second time, I do have a bigger appreciation for it. It's still nowhere near as good as this one, in my opinion. To me, this is still the epitome of horror anthology. But I can definitely say I like it a lot more. It's growing on me more. Not as much as Chainsaw 2. That is one that I really disliked, and now I really enjoy. I know I'm 5 minutes in and I haven't really said much about the movie itself yet, so I'll just get right down to the review. It came out in 1987, and it was actually put out by New World Pictures, which was a company that was started by Roger and Gene Corman in 1970. Did a lot of cheap flicks, exploitation films, a lot of the like women in prison, sexploitation films in the 70s. Few horror hits, like the same year this came out, they put out Hellraiser. And then they went really downhill and went bankrupt in 1997. As scary as anything you're apt to see, New York Daily News. It was supposed to have 5 stories like the original film, but due to budgetary reasons, they cut it down. So one of the stories, A Cat from Hell, would go on to be in the Tales from the Dark Side movie. There's another one called Pinfall that was never shot, but if you get the Arrow Blu-ray, the limited edition, there's the limited edition and the regular Arrow Blu-ray. Both are now out of print. But if you get at least the limited edition, it comes with the comic adaptation of Pinfall. So it would be really cool to have that Blu-ray for that reason. I think that'd be really cool. The stories are okay. I mean, it opens up with Billy. He's waiting for a truck. We see the creep, who's played by Tom Savini. Tom Savini did return to do the effects. And he's voiced by, was it Joe Silver? Is that the name of the guy that did the voice for the creep? Joe Silver, yeah. Which, what else was... He died 2 years later. Wow. Oh, he was in Cronenberg's Rabid and Shivers. Okay. And he gives Billy the newest issue of Creepshow. We go into the animation. Now, the animation, it's nothing like the original film, which was one of my favorite aspects of the original. The opening credits look promising. The stills that transition into the first scene and the fade into animation of the last scene, those look good. But now we have cutscenes that tell its own story that I really did think was needed. In between the stories, we see Billy go to the post office to pick up a package that contains something he bought from the Creepshow comic, a Venus flytrap. Being targeted by bullies, being chased by bullies, and then at the end, when the bullies get their just desserts. Pun intended. Now, I really don't think the cutscenes needed a story. The original film didn't have it. Just the animation looked so good in the original that, you know, just seeing the comic, like the pages flip and flying out of the trash can or starting to rain, that was good enough. And also the animation looks very cheap. It looks like a early CD-ROM game. I know I sound like shit. It looks like a early CD-ROM game. Very choppy, not very good animation. But again, the stills of the first and last shot of each story and the opening credits look fine. 10 minutes in, what's the first story? Old Chief Woodenhead is the first one. George Kennedy and Dorothy Lamour, very old actress from back to the Road 2 films, and she did a lot of stuff with Bob Hope and Bing Crosby. They own a general store in this area that's like a desert turning into a ghost town. They're kind of looking over what's left of the town, and there's this Native American tribe nearby, and one of the elders comes by, drops off some turquoise gems that are sacred to them for their collateral for their debt, because they also oversee a lot of other things in the town. And the value of those gems will set them up for life. So then his asshole nephew, Sam, comes by, he's got like a denim jacket, no shirt, long black hair. Like, think Herman Lee from Dragon Force. And he's very proud of his looks and his hair. Keeps talking about his hair and how he's going to make it into Hollywood. He's got his two lackeys, Kavanaugh and Fat Stuff, which Kavanaugh was in The Untouchables. He did a voice in Batman Beyond, Return of the Joker. Fat Stuff, I don't know what else he was in. And Fat Stuff does this high-pitched, cackly laugh that a lot of antagonists in the 80s did. Like, think the asshole guys in Day of the Dead. The opening scene with the drivers in the convertible of Chainsaw 2. Just that obnoxious, cackly laugh. He does do that. Well, they end up killing the wife by accident. So then they shoot George Kennedy, take the jewels, they leave. Outside of the general store, there's this big cigarette shop wooden statue of Old Chief Woodenhead, which after the elder brings the jewels, he kind of waves to the statue and it kind of nods to him, slightly nods, and he kind of sees it and leaves. He comes alive and he goes after the thugs. And I will say, the makeup effects on the statue look fine, but there's a part, because there's this wet red paint, he's supposed to reach down, dab it, do like war paint. The makeup on the hands and everything looks excellent, look top notch. But he does this thing where he opens his eyes and his mouth and lets out a scream. That's where it kind of changed the expression, like he gets angry. Like, I think that works. But when you try to make his eyes open, I didn't think that effect. My favorite part was whenever he moves, like, you hear like the creaking of the wood. I thought that was a nice touch. All the kills are pretty much either stylized or not shot very well. Because Fat Stuff is sitting in a chair at his place. They're planning to meet up later to head to Hollywood so he can become a star because of his hair. Fat Stuff is sitting in a chair watching TV, and we hear phew, phew. And every time we hear it, we see him and he has an arrow in him. Then another one. Then one in his head with blood coming down. And it shows all his posters. Like, he's got nudie posters. He's got an Iron Maiden Trooper poster. Awesome. So it's like we hear the arrow sound, see a poster, then we see where it lands. We don't really see the impact. He goes to Kavanaugh's house. He kills him with a tomahawk, but we see it in a silhouette with blood spatter on the wall. And then he goes after Sam, which Sam shoots him, but he's pretty much indestructible. He reaches through a wall, grabs Sam by the hair, pulls him through a hole, and just as the tomahawk is coming down, it cuts. And it was just like, that's the guy we want to see get it, and we don't see it. We just hear this long scream. And then the elder wakes up in his bed. He has the pouch with the jewels with blood on it. Races down to the store, and he sees old Chief Woodenhead standing there holding the bloody scalp. And he says something about your soul may be at peace. It was okay. I mean, it was a decent morality tale. Something you would see in Tales from the Crypt or Tales from the Dark Side. One thing this film was missing, though, that made Creepshow so awesome, is some of the stuff they did to make it look like a comic book. Like, there would be, like, lighting that's red or blue with, like, a background with color designs to make it look like a splash page. Or scenes would transition with borders so it looks like panels. Or, captions that look like narrative boxes. The first one did that so well. Or like completely black screen with like little like styled shape. Like Father's Day, there's like that little oval to make it look like a mirror, kind of. Stuff like that. This doesn't have any of that. The only reference to a comic book would be the opening and the closing. Even the cutscenes in between. Yeah, we see Billy reading it, but that's about it. We don't have any of the comic stylings, film-wise, that the first one had. And I thought that's a huge detriment. Otherwise, it does feel just like a Tales from the Dark Side film, which even Tom Savini considers Tales from the Dark Side to be the true Creepshow 3. More than this turd. So, even though I liked this the second time around, or liked it more, those tricks with lighting and backgrounds and trying to create a comic book image, the lack of that really hurt this film, I think. So then the second film is the one that everybody likes. It's called The Raft, which I know that image was always on the back of the VHS. I always looked at it when I went to the video store. You have a group of friends, one of which is Paige Hanna, who is Daryl Hannah's sister. 2 guys, 2 girls. They go to this lake. They want to swim out to the raft. They get out to the raft, and there's seemingly this oil slick floating around, which from afar it looks like a big black trash bag is floating, and then when it gets up close, it looks like a really shaggy, like, bathroom carpet. But it's this very corrosive blob that, it's this slimy substance that it melts your skin when it touches you, and when you fall into it, it pretty much consumes and absorbs you. Which, at first it grabs Paige Hanna, and I mean, the effect of the skin melting, again, looks awesome. She's pulled in, and then she does that thing where she rises out of the water and reaches, and she's just got goop and melted skin all over her. Decent effect. Actually, very well done effect. So they think stay on the raft, they're fine. But no, it can go under the raft, seep through the cracks. And that's when it grabs a hold of this one guy, and we see it, starting to melt around his ankle and his calf. He gets pulled down, that like his other leg comes up, so like his foot's up here, pulls him down. And it's just the other couple left. They're standing so that they're not standing on the cracks. The girl falls asleep. He goes Brock Turner on her. Almost. I wonder if the finger bang misfire from Cabin Fever was somewhat inspired by this. Because he's like kissing her, pulls up her shirt, and then it like reaches up and grabs her. It starts like melting her face, pulls her in. And right when it pulls her off the raft, that's when he swims to head for the shore, makes it all the way to the shore, and then this was a cool shot, but I would have liked to see what happened. Get this low to the ground shot of him trying to get up to run, and we just see this wave, like this huge wave of this slime. But just as it's over him, it cuts. And we, camera's way back. We see it kind of go back into the water. We hear a burp. Pans back. We see a sign that says no swimming. Leaves all over it. That's where it freezes and goes to animation. So, like the first film, the second story ends with a sign that has plants all over it. The Raft still is my favorite story. I would say maybe the closest to like a Creepshow type story. But again, you could have done some really cool stuff with the lighting and the background backdrops to make it look like a comic book. Third one I'm not really going to get into because it's the kind of story we've all seen in every anthology type setting. It's called The Hitchhiker. Yeah, there's a Twilight Zone episode, there's Tales from the Crypt episode, pretty sure there's Tales from the Dark Side episode of the lady that keeps encountering the same hitchhiker for so many miles. Hell, this came out the year after The Hitcher with C. Thomas Howell and Rutger Hauer. Rest in peace. This sort of... what was she? I know she was wealthy, but... Okay, just a businesswoman. Oh, okay, so that's... I was confused by the beginning because she tosses him money. He's the gigolo. Okay. So she's driving away. There's this hitchhiker holding up a sign that says Dover. She's not paying attention, hits him. She panics, drives off, hit and run. That's where we get the Stephen King cameo. This one guy pulls over to check out the body. He plays, sort of like a backwoods trucker. He gets out, he's just like, black guy, ain't it? Just the way he says it was funny. So yeah, they talk about the hit and run, and then it's just her encountering the hitchhiker every so often. The twist here is that she bangs him up a little more each time, so every time we see him, he's more and more beat up. And he just keeps saying, thanks for the ride, lady. And, I mean, he was played by Tom Wright, which I thought he looked familiar. He was in, I guess, Exterminator 2. first Tales from the Hood. That's a anthology I will not be getting to, at least not this year. Huh. He was in the Onion movie. Man, this guy's still working all the way up through 2019. All right, cool. And yeah, she just keeps running him over, and at one point she even like runs him over a bunch of times, back and forth. She even talks to herself like, "Yeah, you ran him out." Like, she has a lot of monologues that are very overacted. Lois Childs is the one that plays the woman. She even, another time, like, pins him up against a tree, has this long monologue about how it was all a dream. It's all a dream. And it feels like it goes on forever that she's talking to herself. Driving away. I mean, there's even a part where he comes up from the hood of the car as she's driving. This caught my eye. I was like, damn, they really wanted this movie. So, we've established that she's pinned him up against the tree. Oh no, this is after she ran him over a bunch of times. He's like, we see his hand come up over the hood, so he's like crawling up the car. She goes over this hill, off-road. She's going down this steep, grassy hill. But we see it's not a dummy that's on the front of the car hitting it. It's a person, because we see the person that's like strapped to the grill of this car, I imagine, is pounding this car. So like they actually put a stuntman right on the nose of that car. I was like, damn. Filmmakers had balls back then. So that's when she pins him up against a tree. And I do like the ending when we see how messed up he is, because he gets more and more bloody and beaten up. She gets home, she pulls in her garage. He rolls out from under the car, kind of like Belch in It when he goes to see Henry at the asylum, just how he kind of like rolls out from under. I mean, like, his face is all smashed. He's got like an eye dangling here, another one like poking up here. His jaw is all, like, he's all mangled. His voice is all distorted. Kind of like the Father's Day segment in the first film, just like, and he like gets in the car and it's like he's trying to bite her even though his jaw's all mangled up. And then we just see, you know, the car's still running. So from across the street, we see the garage door close as it's filling up with exhaust fumes. So we get the idea that that's how she dies. Oh, and the Dover sign was around her neck. Yeah, then the epilogue, we see the bullies chase after Billy. They get to this one area, and the Venus flytraps that they took from him in one of the other cutscenes and stomped on are now alive. They're giant. They eat the bullies. Billy's standing there, and then we see the creep in the back of the truck throwing copies of Creepshow as the truck drives off into the distance with the end credits. And, excuse me, once again, I still don't care for the cutscenes. I don't think we needed a story. Telling the story of Billy getting the latest issue, going to pick up a package, chased by bullies, and the bullies get eaten by Venus flytraps. Especially giant, monstrous Venus flytraps. Especially with the style of animation, just really, really cheap, choppy, early CD-ROM game cutscenes or of animation. Don't didn't think it needed a story. Just the original film. This has beautiful, absolutely beautiful animation and just quick little transitions. It really helps make the film. This one does not have as big of a cast as this one. Sure, we have Tom Savini playing the Creep. We have a cameo by Stephen King. As far as people that I recognized, George Kennedy. According to Wikipedia, Will Sampson, Chief Bromden from Will Throw the Cuckoo's Nest, or Taylor from Poltergeist 2 is in this. He's not listed in the credits. I don't remember seeing him. It says he was part of the family. He was with the elder with the gems in the first story, but I didn't see him. So not nearly as big of a cast as this. The acting does suffer from that as well, especially in the Raft. Well, both Chief Woodhead and the Raft has some really poor acting, and Hitchhiker has really, like, what is her name? Dana. The lead girl from Friday the 13th Part 3. Lots of bad, over-the-top monologues like her. Is it Diana Kimmel? That doesn't sound right. But anyway. But yeah, this film really suffered from the poor animated cutscenes, trying to tell a story with that. You would think by having 2 less stories, they would be more developed. But no, this one had 2 more stories. And alright, this one was also a half hour longer. But still, stories felt really quick, which is fine, but also didn't really feel that developed. Really, I mean, it felt more like a TV show. It felt more like Tales from the Dark Side, even more so than Tales from the Crypt. It felt more like Tales from the Dark Side, because it didn't have those Creepshow like lighting tricks and filters and trying to make it look like a comic book like this film did. And that's one of the reasons why I love Creepshow. That's why it's in my top 10 favorite films of all time, on top of being a very sentimental film. This has been going on for over a half hour. I can say I do like it more than the first time I saw it, but I'm still not the biggest fan of it. And even though the Arrow Blu-ray, even though it's out of print, does have good special features, and this is as bare bones as it gets, I'm fine with just having this. Yeah, I mean, I really like the cover art. Sucks they didn't have the original font for Creepshow 2, but yeah, it is far, far inferior to this great film. I mean, the fact that the screenplay was George Romero and is based on Stephen King stories, that's really the only thing that, and I guess the animation, it's suggesting that there's stories from a comic book. The only thing that kind of makes them, yeah. It doesn't have any of the things that make it Creepshow like this film, and I think that's a huge detriment. So that's the first review for the month of October, the month of horror anthologies. Next, I'll get to this. Thank you for watching.